Hello. So this week I am once again just reading whatever I like, whatever physical books have come in from the library because they have the highest priority. And I've already begun, of course. So I picked up Heavenbreaker by Sarah Wolfe. This is sort of starting to go around because I believe they released a pretty sprayed edges version of it at the bookstore. So everyone's like, oh, what's this about? And it's supposed to be like fantasy, sci-fi, space opera kind of deal with a bit of Hunger Games tournament thrown in. But basically you've got a rich dude who tries to off his ex-lover and their illegitimate offspring. Unfortunately, he only succeeds in murdering one of them. So the surviving bastard decides to come and return the favor to dear old daddy and offs him and shoots his carcass off out into space and then tries to get out. So it starts off with her though saying that she had everything planned about how to get in and kill him, but didn't even give a thought to how she was going to get out. And I'm like, so a suicide mission? Was that your plan? You really didn't think at all about, well, you know what, I'd like to be able to get away with this and still live. But no, but somehow she manages to elude everybody. She puts on his rider's helmet and thing. There's like a jousting tournament with these like ships or things. It's very sci-fi. So she gets in there, has a bit of a romantic sort of flirtation with some other dude who thinks she's someone else. But I knew very quickly that I was not going to like this book and probably DNF it, which I did, because of the way it was written. This book is written in a way that every sentence is meant to be set up to be a mic drop moment, but it's not. And I'm going to give you an examples of how dramatic this is. I will train as an animal does. I will devour them all. I am no knight, but I will die like one today. Like every sentence is like, it's not just the end of the chapter. It's constantly like that. So it feels very choppy and staccato and just so extra and over the top. And when you have so many sentences like that, none of them give you chills because it's too much of the same. It's like if you got oats, plain porridge, for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks, you'd get pretty sick of that porridge. Hence, got pretty sick of this book and its writing style. It was just so unnatural and the character felt like a caricature. I didn't buy her at all. She was like Kylo Ren on steroids. She also seemed to suffer from fade to black sickness, where she was just always getting knocked out or passing out and coming to. And I'm like, how many times in one book are we going to do this? This is too many times. Walk around with a helmet, bitch. Like, get some protection. How do you not have punch drunk syndrome by now? Honestly, with all of those head injuries, just this book was just not for me. Could this be super popular? I guess. I don't really get what all of the masses eat up these days. Ever since Fourth Wing, and that, like I said, that went gangbusters. And I read that and I couldn't push through. It was, to me, it was trash. And just the story did not make sense. The stuff that was going on, like, oh, we're don't have many people in our army. We're struggling to fill it, but let's get all of these potential recruits and just kill them off because that's what we should do. Like, And this feels like the same thing. It's just overwritten and over the top, and so much was happening that it just was all pomp and flash bang and no substance. So yeah, that was just not for me. Once again, it's just not for me. Everyone's got their books that they love. That's what the wonderful thing is about this world, is there's a story for everybody, and not every story is for everyone. But this one was just not for me. I gave it a good go. But I, had to let it go so I could find a story that I connect to and that I really enjoy. Because that's all I'm here to do. I'm here to find books that I like, and I want to read and that entertain me. And it wasn't this one. So I DNF'd that. Thank God for my library. I'm so happy that we have libraries. The amount of money that I save by not having to buy 500 books a year. And I would be upset then when I DNF one, because I would have spent my hard-earned money on it. But it's like, not for me. Back you go, out into the world to find the right reader for you. So I am currently reading Psykhe by Kate Forsyth. I love this cover. I saw it in the bookstore when I went on my date with Mr. Too Sweet, and I quickly went to my library and I had it and I snapped it up. Oh, love that new book smell too. I am on page 164, so I'm a decent way through, just over halfway. I'm enjoying it. So there we go. You know what I mean? Put my book down, the next one you pick up, you might actually have a good time. So I had low expectations because this is about Psyche from Eros and Psyche, that mythology. The author in this, though, does choose to use the Roman names of the gods. So instead of Persephone, you have Proserpina. Instead of Aphrodite, Aphrodite, you have Venus. So look, I don't love that because I am Greek, and I love the Greek myth names, but it's the same thing, just different names. And she is the daughter of a horrible king, and she's got two sisters, and he goes to marry them off to brutes. It seems that one of them marries a man named Brutus, and I think their son is going to be Julius Caesar. That's what it sounds like. But while she's been cast off before the father returns to marry them off to men, she ends up apprenticing with what seems to be a midwife witch. Her name is Nocturne, and she has a dog named Nero. Was it Nero? That's great. So then she ends up learning witchy ways. She also sort of casts spells and petitions Hecate for her assistance. There are already mythical creatures in this. So there seems to be, oh my God, they're not centaurs. What's the other one that Puck is? Satyrs. So they already seem to be in here, less rapey than you would usually expect from a satyr, but she's already come across who I assume is Eros or Cupid, Aphrodite's son, but he hasn't been named as such yet. So there is a lot of rape going on in this book. Obviously, it's not on page. It's just alluded to, like their dad takes his slave, for himself. There was a sort of a hint of a sapphic romance between one of the king's daughters and said slave. But once again, nothing on page. So it hasn't had any romance. It's just talk of it having been done, sex having been had. Not with Psyche though. Psyche's still a virgin. She managed to escape the noose of a forced marriage by being too weird and witchy, and no man wanting to touch that for fear his pecker will freeze off by her frigidness and her coldness. But a lot of stuff has happened, and the dad believes it's because he's been cursed because her mother, who died during childbirth, he abducted her and took her for his wife when she was meant to be sacrificed to a god. So he believes that by sacrificing his daughters to said god, he will restore the balance of the debt that is owed. So that's where we are at the moment. She's been shifted off to be a sacrificial lamb, and we'll see how it goes. It's very quiet. Psyche is kind of cool, but she's a very mild-mannered, sweet young woman who just wants to help and heal people and cares for others, which nothing wrong with that. It's just I normally like my heroines with a bit more bite, a bit more sting. But we'll see how it goes. Like I said, I do like the writing style. And so far, it's probably my favorite Greek mythological retelling that I've read thus far. So I think I will definitely finish it. It's feeling like a 3.75 to a 4-star. We'll see how it goes. But that's currently what I'm reading. Today, I am off to brunch with my cousin, my aunt, and my big kid because she's got a day off from school since it's pupil-free day. Teachers write up all the reports. She's coming with us, but that's all that's on the agenda. And then I hope to get some reading done. The only other plans I have is I might be having a kids' play date here tomorrow for my youngest, and I'm going on the second date with Mr. Too Sweet on the Sunday. So besides that, hopefully lots of reading. I'll see you then. I also forgot to mention Happy Pride Month to everyone, and special shout out to my fellow bi and demi folks. It's purple. Hey guys, I'm racing the sunlight, so I'm going to try and be as quick as I can. I'm also going on a date tonight, second one with Mr. Too Sweet, but let me get into it. The other books that I read were Elaine Feeney's All the Good Things You Deserve. So this is a book of poetry, and they vary in terms of how long the poems are. So for instance, some of them are literally one sentence each, and then you have ones that are a few pages of this very closely spaced text. So they do vary. This is mostly, I'd say, centered on trauma, a past trauma that is alluded to. This one wasn't for me. Not many of the poems resonated or struck me emotionally. I just failed to connect to this collection. This author is actually quite popular, and if you like her other works, you'll probably like this one. But yeah, for me, we're not a match. So I did read it all the way through, but it just wasn't anything phenomenal. The next book I picked up was Medea by Rosie Hewlett. So 2 Greek mythology books in one sitting, I know, but they both came in at the same time. I've got like 100 books on reserve, and when they come in is random, and that's how it worked out this week. So look, this one going into it already was a bit sort of behind the ball because I did like Psyche so much. So with Medea, Once again, it follows the myth closely. So you have controlling fathers, gaslighting lovers, and punishing all for the sins of the father. With Medea, it's about her falling for Jason from Jason and the Argonauts and going against her family, betraying them so that he can get his hands on that golden fleece. And basically she's just sacrificing everything for love, and then like helps him in all these trials to win, burns her bridges with the people she loves and those that she didn't, and ends up being vilified as a witch. So Jason comes across as the good innocent guy and her as the evil bitch, pretty much. Medea, I'm not going to spoil it in case you don't know the mythology, but she makes some very questionable choices. Like I said, in her fury, which is valid, she directs it though at those who are quite innocent. And so that is a hard pill to swallow. Not a lot of that is delved into. It's mostly about the trials to get the golden fleece, and then very little afterwards on what she does when she's been wronged. This was okay. It definitely felt like more of a modern writing style. So not so in the time of this, and it was very much littered with a lot of feminist sentences. So calling out the misogyny, but because of the modern writing style, it felt like something someone would say today. And I don't know if I love that in a Greek myth book. I think I want something with a bit more of historic feel rather than something so incredibly modern, but still keeping to the same story. So I think this is where I'm at. I've given this a 3.25 stars. This didn't add anything really original or interesting to the myth. And I think I prefer stories based on the Greek myths to diverge somewhat, to have a different perspective, a different angle, different elements, adapt it to modern day, I don't know, but I don't just want to read a straightforward retelling of the myth because I already know it. So I just feel like I'm rehashing everything and just taking longer to get through the myth, obviously. Look, this does have, I want to say romance, but it's like, I don't think it's a romance anybody wants, you know? And while there were some other characters in here, so Circe makes an appearance, and Atalanta and Meleager and all of them, it is mostly focused on, say, her father and her brother would be the other main two players besides Jason, naturally. But yeah, it was okay, it was fine, but I think going forward, I need more divergence from the original stories for me to want to pick them up. Otherwise, it's just more of the same, unless the writing is absolutely spectacular. In this case, I didn't feel that way. I felt the writing was better in this, but 3.25. The next book I picked up was Birding by Rose Ruan. So this is about two women, one of whom was a former pop star who had a sort of relationship with someone who is quite famous and who is now being dragged with the Me Too movement. And so it's forcing her to look back at things that happened to her and decide, was she sort of assaulted? How is she coping with that? And then the other person has a really toxic relationship with their mother. Their mother is controlling and has her daughter under her heel. And then they end up crossing paths. For me, however, I DNF'd this very, very quickly. The writing style wasn't for me at all. I just found it very confusing. I couldn't get into it. I felt very removed from the story, from the characters. And it was giving me a headache trying to understand what was happening. So this was just a case of this writing style is not for me. I do like the cover though. I think that's pretty cool. I don't know what it has to do with the story. Didn't get that far in, but yes, I did DNF this one. And then I picked up Hurricane Girl by Marcy Domansky, and I gave this a 3 stars. Basically, you have a woman whose house gets obliterated by a hurricane. After the hurricane, she's filmed on television about losing her house. A cameraman then invites her to his house. She makes some really, really dumb decisions. So if you can't read about characters who have awful critical thinking, are making mistake after mistake, even though internally in their monologue, they are acknowledging that this is not the thing that they should do, and yet they do it anyway, don't read this book. Do not read it. But basically, her dumb decisions lead her to being physically assaulted, grievously harmed by an unhinged man, and then her recovery afterwards. Pretty much though, even at the beginning, the tone and the character's voice felt very distant, very removed. And then after the injury, even more so. It felt very deadpan and apathetic, and she sort of basically just floats around. There's no real story, I guess. And the tone is what got me the most. It just made everything feel dull and drained of color. I just couldn't connect to the main character. And like I said, she continued to make really odd, nonsensical decisions. And then it culminates in another violent scene. So there are like 2 violent scenes in this. And I just felt very frustrated by the whole thing. I didn't hate it, but I was annoyed at the character and the progression of the story. And I felt it was kind of all a bit meaningless. The writing style was okay, a bit plain though. Like there was no interesting sort of inner monologuing being had. I just found her such a 2D nothing character. Even though something shocking happened to her, the rest of the book was just so boring. And like I said, I just kept wanting to hit her over the head for the dumb decisions she was making. Like, maybe you need another brain injury to give you a personality and some sort of agency and direction. This wasn't for me. 3 stars though. But I think this is doing the rounds at the moment. But yeah, if you don't like the character before the head injury, you're going to like her even less afterwards. So that was Hurricane Girl. And then I read How to Become the Dark Lord or Die Trying by Django Wexler. So I ended up giving this a 3.5 stars. This is about a human girl from our world who wakes up in a fantastical land and is told, "You are the chosen one and must save us from the Dark Lord." She then spends 237 lives trying to overthrow said Dark Lord. But then after another slow, torturous death, she decides, you know what? I don't want to get my fingers bitten off by a weird-ass snake lady anymore. F this shit. After I respawn, because every time she dies, she goes back to the beginning and respawns. So there's no like save point. It's back to the start. She decides instead, if you can't beat them, become them. So they said that this book is kind of like Groundhog Day meets Guardians of the Galaxy. For me, it was definitely way more I hate fairyland with a bit of illustrated girl and long live evil. Put those 3 together, that's what it is, because this has a ton of violence, dirty talk, and pop culture references in it. The FMC is pansexual, horny, and trying to squash her conscience while on the path to the greatest evil there ever was. So she wants to become the Dark Lord, but is realizing there's a lot of collateral on the way. How do I feel about that? How do I feel about sacrificing these minions for my greater glory? This was interesting in the beginning, but the FMC's voice is full on. So it's snarky and sarcastic. And like I said, she has a potty mouth and she's super randy. And it's got a bit of like humor, I guess, laced all throughout it. So it is a lot. It's a bit extra and it's like that the whole book. So by the end of it, I was feeling a bit burnt out on it. It also has the footnotes. And you remember, what was that book that I read? I had the footnotes where I found, it was the Nevernight Chronicles. So basically it's got massive footnotes at the end of each chapter, which is once again just a vehicle for the author to inject her sense of humor into the book. I'm not going to say I found her sense of humor annoying, but once again, after a certain amount of time, it kind of wore on me a little bit and I wasn't so jazzed about it. And I would just sort of start skimming through the footnotes because I'm like, I'm not really lolling, so therefore, what are they adding for me to the story besides increasing my reading time? So yeah, it was interesting because it wasn't like anything that I'd read recently, but I don't love it and I won't be continuing on with the series. So this is one of those books where it's about, she gets a horde and she slowly progresses across the land to get to this sort of evil lord conference where they crown the new Dark Lord. So it's move a bit, have a battle, move a bit, have a battle, move a bit, have a battle. You know, she's got to get to Mordor, basically. So if you don't like that kind of setup, then you won't like it. The sex scenes themselves are not really on page. She just talks a little bit about it afterwards. It's more her flirting with the people she wants to bang that are a bit more, vulgar, but there's not really any sex scenes in it. And I didn't really feel the romance. I didn't buy it. I didn't really buy her settling down with who she decides to settle down with. I'm like, no. How long is that going to last, really? So yeah, it is set up to be a series, but won't be continuing on. I do think though, if you start reading it and you like the humor and you like the style, then you'll probably love the book. Conversely, if you don't, just put it down because it's like that way the whole thing. It doesn't let up. It doesn't die down a bit. It's just at an 11, the entire novel. So let's recap everything that I read for this particular vlog. So we had Psykhe by Kate Forsyth, which was a 4 stars about Psyche and Eros, and that was my favorite read of this vlog. Then we have Elaine Feeney's All the Good Things You Deserve, which is a poetry collection that focuses on trauma. Wasn't for me. Medea by Rosie Hewlett, story about Medea and Jason of the Argonauts. I gave this a 3.25 stars. Birding by Rose Ruan. This was a litfic, DNF for me. Hurricane Girl by Mary Demansky. This was a 3 stars about a woman who loses everything, including her personality and ability to make smart decisions. And I finished it with How to Become the Dark Lord or Die Trying by Django Wexler, and I gave that one a 3.5 stars. So that was everything for this reading vlog. Until next time, stay wild, Star Child.